I didn't set it up early enough. It makes me StreamYard makes me schedule it at least 10 minutes before I go on, so that's why it says 10:35, but I'm on time, so quit giving me trouble, Leonard. Leonard loves to be early. Okay. Anyway, happy holidays. We are festive today, and I think that I'm live on both Spreaker and StreamYard and YouTube. So I'm still trying to figure out how to get it live on the website, but without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. It's so nice to see you, Aiden, my favorite little youngster. It's just really nice to see you. I hope that you're doing well. I hope that we celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas here at this house, which is really fun. So I hope that depending on whichever one you celebrate, that you're having a wonderful time. This year's a little bit crazy, but we look forward to seeing you and your dad again next time we head to St. Louis. So today we're going to talk about drafting, mock drafting specifically, but I'm working on the draft guide right now. So I'm going over player profiles, and I thought it was interesting because one thing that you keep seeing over and over is 3 true outcomes with hitters. It's the 3 true outcomes basically don't depend on anything. It's when you hit the ball and it's not in play. So either a walk, or if you don't hit the ball, a ball not in play, a strikeout, a walk, or a home run. It seems that baseball has been trending towards 3 true outcomes for the last several seasons, and I do believe that it's going to continue to trend that way, kind of like we see pitchers not going deep into games anymore. We see that trend a lot recently. So today we're going to talk about some 3 true outcome hitters, some potential or like right on the verge of being a 3 true outcome hitter. And we're going to talk about some interesting tidbits that I found in the Baseball Forecaster that I've been reading recently. Whoops, I shut my notes. Hold on a second. I got to get my notes open. I shut the wrong notes. Okay. All right. So we talk about getting bargains in drafts. We have a mock draft on tomorrow. It is for Sirius XM, and I have to pick first, which I absolutely hate picking first. And the biggest reason that I hate picking first is not that like I'm afraid that my player is not going to get any value. The problem is that you don't get another pick until way long. It's like 20, those 12-team leagues. It's 24 picks until you get another pick. It's horrible. Like, I would much rather have a pick right in the middle where, it hits you every time it goes by. Every time if you're picking 8th, although you have to pay a lot more attention in a slow draft, I just think it is just so much better in the long run for your team. And in fact, the Baseball Forecaster does go through some of that. It talks about how much, like, what do you gain back if you're in the 12th spot picking, or if you're in the first spot picking? And really, the most value for your money comes right in the middle of the draft. So, I mean, I think it's preference more than anything, but yay, I'm glad, Aiden. Nice to see you. Glad you're having a good holiday. I hope to get you in our Legion fantasy draft this year. Aiden's how old are you now, Aiden? I would say maybe 8 or 9. Aiden, 8, 7. Sorry, I'm not great at that. But anyway, I hope that you will consider playing fantasy baseball with us this year, and we'll get you started. And by the time that you're a teenager, you will be able to beat your own father at fantasy baseball. Okay, that's the goal. Beating the dad. Okay. So in the Baseball Forecaster this year, we learned, this is not probably like news to a lot of you out there, but we do know that the $30 players, so you're talking about, any player that you're going to spend $30 on is gone in the first round. There are no $30 players being drafted in the second round of a snake draft or the third or anywhere. It's all in the first round. So I will never spend $30 on a pitcher. I know that for sure. I may spend $30 on a hitter. It depends on who it is. But even in auction drafts, they're going in the first round. You're not going to find a $30 player outside of the first round. So, and it's good for those of us that don't really like to spend a lot of money on players. We try to encourage spending money, other people spending money, because the less money they have, the more beneficial it is to you. So, the goal at the beginning is trying to get other people to spend money. And so, it's the thing about auction drafts is that it gets a little bit crazy, like in the middle rounds, where do you throw out if it's your turn to nominate a player, do you throw out a player that for sure that people are going to bid on, that maybe you just don't like that much? Well, that becomes a problem later in the draft when you don't have any money left, and say you throw out a player you don't really want, expecting the rest of the pack to spend money, and they don't, and then you're stuck with that player. So that's, the downside. But as far as when people have money at the beginning of the draft, start throwing out those players that you don't want, but maybe somebody else does. Another good piece of advice is to throw out a DH early. So a guy that only qualifies as a designated hitter, a lot of times people aren't willing to spend money on these hitters early in the draft because they don't like to fill that spot, especially when a hitter only qualifies as a designated hitter. People tend to not want to fill that early. I don't really know what the logic is behind that. Maybe it's like they're planning on getting stuck late in the draft and they need to have that ability to draft a player for categories, and then they know that they can put that player in the DH spot because everybody qualifies at DH. Filling that early means that you don't have that wiggle room to draft any player late. You have to draft either a first baseman or a third baseman or whatever it is that your team needs so that you can fill your roster. I don't really believe in that too much. A guy like Nelly Cruz has so many home runs, and every year he comes through. The fact that he's designated hitter only keeps his longevity, and it keeps him in the lineup no matter what, because you figure, Nelly Cruz is an example, but a lot of these guys, they would not make it into the lineup every day if they had to play defense, a lot of these DH type fellas. And so it is a little bit of a pain in the ass if you're just dealing with guys that only qualify at DH, because should it come down to it, you have nowhere else to put him. But, obviously it's important to draft players that qualify at multiple positions, which is another thing that we haven't really figured out. Heading into your drafts, the most important thing you could do is read the rules and the settings in your league. That's the number one thing. And it sounds so ridiculous to say that, but you would be so surprised at how many people don't look at the league settings, because nowadays leagues, they differ in so many ways. From the specific category stats that you use to the number of people on the roster to the number of teams in the league, all of these things are going to affect the draft value. So it's important, okay, even though it sounds ridiculous, but you have to pay attention to the rules and the settings in your league. You know exactly what you have to do to compete, and also where you can maybe get a little bit of leverage on the rest of your league. So take advantage of these settings that they every league is like, as we move forward, there are so many ways to change the league settings that every league is going to be different in some way or another. Maybe you use, instead of batting average for a stat, you use on base percentage. That's going to change the value of hitters in your league. Maybe if you have 10 teams versus 15 teams in a league, that is absolutely going to change the amount of money that you will spend on a player and where you will draft them in your league. Obviously, it's going to change the free agent pool of players. So, maybe you're not as willing to draft a high upside player with a very low floor, because, if you have to get rid of him, which I recommend highly at the beginning of the season, is to just, have a couple spots to rotate players in and out. You have to let go of players that are not cutting it early in the season. We saw that especially true in 2020 because there's only 60 games. So how much, leeway are you going to give a guy that's not performing? You got to get rid of him immediately and find a guy that is performing, even if it's only temporary, because depending on how many teams there are in your league, that designates how many people there are to pick up in the free agent pool. So all $20, all the players that cost $20 or more, they're going to go in the first 4 rounds. So, and then after that, it's the dollar in game. It starts at round 21. In auctions, basically everybody after round 21 is going to be close to $1. A lot of people just don't have money. So think of that when you're deciding how much you're going to spend. And another thing that the forecaster brings up that I think is kind of important to talk about is that if you have a player that you have decided he's worth $20 on draft day, and he's at $23 or $24, and he fits your roster construction, meaning you have targets, you have category targets that you enter the season with, and these category targets should be based on last year's standings. You know how many stolen bases you need. You know how many home runs you need. You know how many RBIs you need to compete, okay? If this is the same league from last year, it makes it much easier. And as you go through drafting, you keep track of how close you are to these targets, right? And if a player that you say in your auction values is worth 20 and you need that player to hit your targets, you think that player is really great for you, you spend 25, 26, you spend whatever it takes to make your team whole, regardless of auction value, because it is completely based on everybody else in your league. Like, it's based on that specific draft. Maybe you have Mike Trout as a value of $35 or $40, whatever you have Mike Trout as. By the way, I'm going to get stuck drafting Mike Trout. He's boring. Why is he boring? Because the excitement lays in youngsters, Fernando Tatis types. I mean, I'm tempted to draft Tatis because I know that he's so exciting to watch. These young guys like Acuna and just there's quite a few young, talented players. I mean, you could find like 3 of them on Toronto or a couple of them in Atlanta. You can find them in San Diego. And it's fun to watch these players. But as far as, how important is it to draft a good player in the first round? How often does it work out where you draft in the first round your player that you draft? How often does it work out that player actually lives up to expectations? I have the numbers, actually. So going all the way back to 2013, let's start out. A batter who hits, 205 players had a $30 season between 2003 and 2008. This is a 5-year period. There were 205 players that had one $30 season. Okay, that means they earned $30. And guess how many repeated that the next season? Out of 205, only 70 actually repeated a $30 season the next season. So you can't just assume that because a player earned $30 that he's going to earn $30 next year. And how many of the top 10 players drafted actually finished the season in the top 10? It's lower than one might think. I mean, it's the percentage that this happens in 17 seasons. The overall percentage of players that actually finish in the top 10 after being drafted in the top 10 is 33.7%. So about 34% of players that are drafted in the top 10 are going to finish that way. And if you expand that to the first 2 rounds, you get actually a 50% chance. Okay. So in 2020, 5 out of the top 10 finished in the top 10. In 2019, it was only 4 players. In 2018, it was 3 players. And 2018 is a little bit weird because if you expand that to right after pick 10 was 11, 12, 13, and 14 picks, those were all in the top 10. So even though 2018 only shows 3 players out of the top 10 drafted finished high, if you expand that to the top 15 drafted and the top 15 finishers, you will have 7 instead of 3. So it's a little bit misleading, but the average is 33.7% chance that the player that you draft in the first round is actually going to finish that way. Now, I mean, how many times has Mike Trout done this? Let me check this out real quick. So Mike Trout, how many times has he done this? Let's look at it from 2013. He counts. Okay, 1 year, 2014, 2, 2015. He's there too, 2015. So that's 3 out of 3 so far. Let's see. 4 out of 4. I should have done this earlier. It doesn't look like he made it in 2017 or 2018. He didn't finish in the top 10 or the top 15, actually. He didn't do well in 2018. But the bottom line is Mike Trout, okay? He's usually on here. 2019, he didn't either. Mike Trout finished 18th overall in 2019. In 2020, he finished... I don't see him on here in 2020 either. So do I draft Mike Trout now? I mean, yes, he did it for like 5 years straight. But is he going to finish in the top 10? He really didn't in 2019 or 2020 compared to the rest of the league. He just didn't finish in the top 15. I can see that on my board here. Of course, look at who else you have. I mean, in 2020, Ronald Acuna Jr. was drafted number 1 overall on average. Okay. This guy didn't finish anywhere near. Now, we're going to talk about 3 true outcome players. And Ronald Acuna Jr., I know he steals bases. I know that he isn't like the typical 3 true outcome player that you think of. But because of his strikeout percentage, because of his walk percentage, and because of his ability to hit home runs, he absolutely could be a 3 true outcome player. Because think about it. Stolen bases, they're not part of this equation. You can still be a 3 true outcome player and steal bases. It doesn't like exclude stolen base guys. It just usually we're talking about guys with low contact rate, high strikeouts, and they don't run fast. You think of that when you think of power guys. But believe me, Acuna Jr. is on the verge of qualifying as a 3 true outcome player, even though he runs. There's a couple other guys too that do run and that's just coming from me. Like, I don't know. It may be to you don't consider a guy that runs or has those. You would consider that, Acuna Jr. maybe more of like a 5 tool guy because he has the 5 categories. But then you got to wonder, like, what about his strikeout rate? What happened to his strikeouts? Maybe it's just a fluke. Maybe it's just a 1-year thing, but I just put him on the list because I think that it's important to pay attention to these certain things. So I believe that it's important to keep track of what other players are doing, even if it's only for the reason of like in a snake draft, you can kind of figure out once you're halfway through with the draft, you can kind of figure out what the people next to you or the people in front of you that are drafting right before you or after you, what do they need to complete their roster or make it whole? Obviously, you have to have every position covered. And so if you get to a point where you need a first baseman and a corner, and the guy that's drafting after you and be in between your next pick, if that guy already has first baseman and a corner, then you don't really need to worry about that guy stealing your first baseman or corner. You can leave him there for another round. If you need pitchers and the guy after you needs pitchers, and then, everybody in between, your pick now and your next pick, they all need pitchers, You got to get the best pitcher on the board. So in snake drafts, it is important to pay attention to what your league mates are doing as far as where they are in completing their roster. And in auction drafts, it's as important, maybe even more important, to pay attention to what the other teams in your league are doing, because it will give you an idea of how much people are going to be willing to spend and how much they're going to fight you over that player. So, of course, if everybody in your league already has a third baseman, the chances of them fighting you for the best third baseman left is probably not very high, because they need something else that they need to save their money for. So it gets to a point in the draft where that is important. And it's also important to pay attention to how much money do they have. I have, out of $260, I have 50 left. I'm the only one with $50 left. I made this mistake huge in Tout Wars. In my second year playing in Tout Wars, I did not pay attention to everybody else's money. I was only paying attention to my money. And I didn't do a very good job of that either, because you see, too much money, it makes you look bad. So, like, even if you have to spend, I see this happening a lot with experts, even if you have to spend like an ungodly amount of money on your last player, you'll do it just because it looks bad to have a bunch of money left over. It looks like you're not keeping good track, which I wasn't. I had no idea that I had way more money than anybody else, and I passed up on players that I should have bid on because I know I could have gotten them. Like, that particular season, I remember it was Andrew McCutchen, where it was a couple dollars, and I absolutely had money to spend on him, and my outfield would have been completely better had I done that. But I didn't realize how strong I was in the bidding in the bidding situation, because I wasn't paying attention to the fact that all these other people only had a small amount of money left to spend, while I had plenty of money, and I should have absolutely done that. And you will run out, you will have all these players on your draft list, right? On your queue. You have all these players in there that you consider drafting. And all of a sudden you run out of spots. Like, you would love to get this really late round, third baseman, but now you don't have any place for him. So he's gone. I think it's, a good idea would be to see, according to ADP, which people use completely wrong most of the time. ADP is not really for valuing players. It's just for comparing them to see where they're going in drafts. Where are other people drafting this player? And it doesn't matter what you think of the player. It matters what people, when are they drafting him? And I suppose it does matter what you think of a player, but if there's 15 second basemen or 15 middle infielders that are all similar and their average, that's a trend that we've seen in the last couple seasons. It's really deep. Middle infield used to be super shallow. It's really deep. There's players that you could get really late that are completely acceptable middle infielders. And so to draft a guy early that's a middle infielder, unless he has something amazing to give you, it's just a waste to draft Altuve in the first or second round. It's a waste to draft a guy like, I would say Ozzie Albies, but I haven't really studied Ozzie Albies that much, and I know that he hits the ball super hard. I know that he has a decent work ethic, so those are things I take into consideration. But okay, Paul DeJong. Paul DeJong is available late in every draft. He's a very late round shortstop who is Javi Baez. Like, if you compare their last year's stats, Paul DeJong and Javi Baez are similar in what they put out. Bad batting average, lots of power. Baez is going to continue to see less and less stolen bases. Paul DeJong doesn't steal bases, but he hits the ball really hard. So does Javi when they make contact. But here's the difference. What Javi Baez, what we saw happen to him, could be a mix of a couple things. First of all, he was very pissed off that he cannot use in-game, like his iPad in the dugout. Like, he can't look at video live. They made it illegal in baseball to use your iPad or to watch live video in the dugout, and it affected a couple people, or at least they say that it did. These players were not pleased that they couldn't use this in-game video that they feel like was a very big asset to how they, how they approach the plate. They look at the video from their last at bat and they say, okay, this is what I need to do different. It's Javi Baez and JD Martinez. But I will tell you this, Javi Baez, to me, I don't even regard this idea of the video, because we've watched Javi Baez skate by and kind of avoid bad batting average. I mean, you would never just look at his stats and think for a second that his strikeout rate is like almost 30%, because he bats like 280. Okay. We're drafting this guy in the second round, and nobody's paying attention to the fact that he's striking out 28% of the time. Eventually, that is going to catch up with you. It doesn't matter who you are. It will eventually catch up with you, especially as you get older. You will have a slower bat speed. You can't get your bat around as quick as you used to be able to, and that will be a problem with your bad plate discipline. So that's important to pay attention to, even if you see a guy like Javi Baez and you're like, woo woo. No, just wait for Paul DeJong like 20 rounds later, literally, because they have the same stats, like completely comparable players. Okay, moving on. So I haven't even started on my 3 true outcome players. I'm just blabbing. Lenny's probably happy. I get all of my blabbing out and I don't have to blab to him. Okay, so we talked about the fact that 205 players had a $30 season in a 5-year period, and 70 repeated it the next season. When you do mock drafts, if you have the ability, obviously you do in mock drafts, you usually don't in regular drafts, pick the place where you want to draft from. You don't really know where you're going to draft. It's just random. And a lot of times they don't even tell you where you get to draft until like that day. And so you have to be aware of the fact that your draft is going to change in a snake draft a lot, depending on where you draft. Drafting first is not the same as drafting in the 12th spot. So when you do mock drafts, choose some different spots, and also draft players that you don't normally draft. That way you can see where the players that you do normally draft, where they're going. It's impossible to see what other people are willing to spend on a player if you continue to draft him. By not drafting the players that you love and letting the other people in the league draft that player, you will be able to gain a much better idea of where to pick this player if you choose to keep him. Not only that, but it forces you to study players that you just haven't studied or you're just not that interested in. A lot of times these players, if you're not paying attention, they will just slip under the radar, and like you're not paying attention to that player, but everybody else is. And, you just want to be, the more aware you are, the more players you know, the better off. You don't have to know them by name, know them by stats category. And I mean, I think that women aren't taking advantage of the fact that fantasy baseball is not based on your knowledge of the players, or like how many players do you know by name, and can you identify a player if he was walking down the street. Most women are not able to say, oh, Mike Trout did this, or like Paul DeJong. Most women don't do that. But the beauty of that is that can be used in your advantage if you're not familiar with players, is that you don't have any biases. You are not biased about players, and you don't have in your mind like, oh, Edwin Encarnacion is a great designated hitter, and I'm going to draft him because he's still available. What a steal. Okay, that's bad. But if you don't know his name and you see his stats, you are able to avoid falling into this really bad mistake of, in your mind, you have an idea of these players because you know them. Or Yankees. I'm not a fan of the Yankees. In fact, I will root for anybody but the Yankees. And does that affect me in fantasy? Yeah, I mean, subconsciously, it totally could if I'm not actually paying attention to that. Player bias, it works against you in fantasy. So don't think that if you don't know the players, like, and you have a huge history with the player, a lot of times in fantasy, you will just never draft a player again because of what he did for your team last year. For instance, I will never draft Charlie Morton again because of what he did last year, which was nothing. But if I had Charlie Morton on my team, not last year, but the rest of the time that he's played in his career, I might, or the good seasons that he had, I'm much more willing to draft him. But we all have biases depending on what players have done to our teams. And so anyway, moving on, try not to look at player name, look into new players, draft other players that may fit into your team so that you can see where other people are drafting the players that you like. Because the value of a mock draft is to really draft from different positions, draft against whoever, either real people or computers, try to put together the best team, see where you can draft, like when do you need to draft the starting pitcher. Everybody feels like they need to have a competitive starting pitching rotation. What does that consist of? Every year it changes a little bit, and it's going to get to the point where a starting pitcher, the difference between a starting pitcher and a reliever is not going to be that great. In fact, I foresee wins becoming completely irrelevant and going out the window. In fact, because we've seen such an increase in velocity in starting pitchers and also we know that the more pitches that you throw that hard, the more likely you are to end up with Tommy John surgery or throwing out your arm, ending your career, whatever. The harder that you throw, the more risky you are as a pitcher, whether we like it or not. I mean, those are the best pitchers, right? But leaving them in the game for 5 or 6 or 7 innings is not a thing anymore. And so you have these pitchers where coming up as a youngster, it's like, if you don't throw 100 miles an hour, you're not even considered to be in the major leagues. Like, you'll never make it. There's still some that do. And those are the pitchers that have longevity. But you'll see even the rules are starting to head towards this multiple innings from the starter, the reliever. You'll have a starting pitcher, a setup guy, and a reliever. That's what you'll have. Like, there won't be any such thing as I don't think wins is a great category. I don't think ERA is a great category because we have so many better categories now. Like, even FIP is better than ERA as far as determining how good a pitcher is. ERA just depends too much on what the rest of the people in the field are doing. If you have Nicholas Castellanos out there and you're getting crapped on as far as your ERA is concerned, because every time the ball goes to him, you can count on it not coming in time. Okay, that's it. So, okay. Anyway, let's talk about 3 true outcomes and just a couple of players. So when a ball is not put in play, which is a walk, a strikeout, or a home run, it's usually somebody that hits the ball really hard, walks a good amount, and strikes out over 25% of the time. So walk rate above 10%, strikeout rate above 25%, and a hard hit rate. Actually, a lot of these guys have low contact. Contacts 70% or like right around 70%, I would say. That was really the threshold that I used to create my list. And the 2 players that you can think of as like the poster child for a 3 true outcome hitter right now in baseball is Joey Gallo and Miguel Sano. These 2 guys are like poster child, 3 true outcome, meaning especially Joey Gallo, who we actually saw in 2019. We saw his batting average rise. We saw it go from, this is a guy that has said straight up, I don't hit to the opposite. I mean, you want to talk about shifting. This guy he doesn't hit to the opposite field. He's not going to learn how to hit to the opposite field. He's going to strike out and he's going to hit home runs. And this is a combination of fly ball rate, hard hit, hard contact. We did see his batting average go from 210 to 253 in 2019. So we kind of entered 2020 with the expectation that maybe this guy isn't going to hit 210. And unfortunately, I think that 2019 is the outlier here because he struck out even in 2019 when we saw his batting average go up to 253. He was striking out 38.4% of the time. Think of that. 38.4% of the time he strikes out. His batting average was a lie. And the only reason that his batting average was able to be at 253 is the fact that he had a batting average on balls in play of 368. It came back down to where we normally see it, which is 240. That's even lower than normal. So his strikeouts are a problem. And, just as long as you go into the season knowing that this is what you can expect. Last year, we were a little thrown off, but I don't know why, because all you have to do is take a quick look at the strikeout rate and see that is an outlier, that it is not possible to maintain a batting average decent if you're going to strike out almost 40% of the time. You just can't do it. But he does take walks, so he walks almost 13% of the time. And his ballpark, Texas got a new ballpark last year, Globe Life Park, and it was not great for him. We're still trying to figure out if this park is a hitter's park or a pitcher's park. Obviously, there were no fans last year until they had all the playoff games there, or they had the World Series there. So that's interesting. But as far as Joey Gallo goes, he was much better on the road than he was at home. His contact rate is minimal. It's 59%. And so here's a guy, you know what you're getting. Okay. He's going to have a horrible batting average. He does play decent defense, so he will stay in the batting order and he will stay in the lineup. He's not completely undraftable, but he is much better in an on-base percentage league because he can take a walk. He is not great for average leagues. If you're counting average, do not draft him. These guys, yes, they hit for power. Miguel Sano, yes, he hits for power. But now that he plays first base instead of third base, he is a lot less valuable in fantasy. If he was third base, think about how much more valuable he is, because obviously this guy is like the hardest hitter in baseball. Last year, he only walked 8.8%, which is close to 10%. But like I said, my threshold for this was 10% walks. And how can I say he's like the poster child when he only walked 8%? And the thing is, with Ceneaux, like his entire career, he's been in the majors since 2015. He's always walked more than 10%. So, okay, last year he did get COVID. I believe he had COVID. Yeah, he started a few days late because he had COVID, and then he had a sore neck late in the season. But when he made contact, he ranked third in baseball in hard hit rate. 57.3% hard hit rate. Unbelievable. That second in average exit velocity, according to Baseball Savant, which is 95.2 miles an hour. If it was a full season last year, he still, even with COVID, even with his sore neck, he still would have hit 35 home runs if you even that over a full season. His contact rate is dismal, 51%, a 43.9% strikeout rate, and an 8.8% walk rate. All of these are career worst, okay? He did not have a good season as far as that's concerned, but he still hits bombs. That's one thing with Miguel Sano. You can count on the fact that he's going to hit the ball hard. He's going to hit the ball in the air. And when he does hit the ball, by the way, that's why these three true outcome players, they do not have a good contact rate for the most part. They find a way around that by walking, taking walks. I mean, why pitchers even walk these guys is beyond me. It really means that they have absolutely like no command or control, because if they know that this hitter is going to take a walk. So if I were pitching against one of these guys that strikes out 40% of the time, it would just make sense to throw the ball right down the middle of the plate. I mean, why are you walking this guy? You know he's going to take a walk on you if you let him. So that's crazy to me. All right, but the problem with Ceneaux, and this is going to affect where you want to draft him, is the fact that he plays first base. First base, there's a ton of true outcome guys that play first base. This is not that valuable. Playing even outfield would be more valuable, but I don't know. Like, I say that, and while I'm saying that, I think to myself, like, first base used to be really deep for a long time. It was like anybody can play first base. David Ortiz plays first base, like Adam Dunn. All of these three true outcome guys can play first base. But the truth of the matter is, first base at a point in your draft, you're going to see first base, it just drops off as far as getting a quality. I mean, you might end up with Brandon Bell, which is a really great late round pick. Brandon Belt continues to impress every year. Well, maybe not impress, but he continues to outperform his draft spot every year. You can count on it because he makes good contact and he hits the ball hard, and he has the ability to hit. I mean, this guy can hit. Bottom line, he's not flashy and he's really boring to think about. But if you get stuck late in your draft, another guy, if he gets a team to play with, is Mitch Moreland. Here's a guy that hits the ball hard, makes great contact, doesn't get any love in fantasy, but these two guys you can rely on late in your draft in case you get to a point you missed out on first baseman. These two guys, seriously, Brandon Belt and Mitch Moreland are totally underrated. If Mitch Moreland gets a team, I think he's a free agent right now. Anyway, Jesse Winker I have on the list. Jesse Winker is projected to get 27 home runs, bat 266, 67 RBIs, and 72 runs with 1 stolen base. Here is a guy that walks 15% of the time. He hits in Great American Ballpark, which is Cincinnati, and it's amazing that Cincinnati actually it's like one of the easiest ballparks to hit home runs out of in all of baseball. But the fact that their pitching staff has been able to keep the home runs down at home is interesting. Still, it doesn't affect the hitters, and Winker fits right in to Great American Ballpark because that is a place where you can hit lots of home runs and you'll see like singles and doubles go down. This year, though, we saw him get better against lefties, which he was horrible against lefties. He had 38 plate appearances this year against lefties. He hit 290, if you can imagine that. And he had a 421 on base percentage. And this is all due to his ability to get walks. The thing is, Jesse Winker would not even have had an opportunity should Nick Senzel have been healthy, and he wasn't. So they were kind of forced in to letting Jesse Winker have a chance against left-handed pitching, and he did not disappoint whatsoever. So that was lucky for him, but he proved his worth. And I think that one thing about him to note is that he played 16 games in the outfield, and the rest of the games were in DH spot. So whether or not he's going to qualify as an outfielder, I do believe that in your leagues, you have to change the number of games that they played to qualify, because in 60 games, I would think of it, it's 1/3 of a normal season. If your league goes by 15 games or 10 games that they have to play at a position before they can qualify, you have to divide it by 3. That means that anybody that played in the outfield at least 5 times should qualify in the outfield. We don't really know. The baseball forecaster has, they use 7 as the cutoff point. The draft guide that I'm putting together is using 5 because if it's normally 15 times to qualify, you got to divide it by 3. That's my opinion. I don't know if many leagues are going to do that. It's something to pay attention to. 16 games, Jesse Winker played in the outfield. The rest, the 37, was at DH. He should get more chances against lefties because he proved himself worthy when he was able to do it out of total necessity and not because they thought he could. So number of barrels, 14 barrels. So every 7.7 plate appearances, he hits a barrel. It's pretty good. Jesse Winker can't hit opposite field either very good. His hard contact rate is 49%, which is huge. He hits the ball super hard, and he very rarely ever hits the ball soft. In fact, his soft contact rate is only 10%. That's huge. His max exit velocity last year was 113 miles an hour, and his average exit velocity is 83.7 miles an hour. The percentage of hits that he hits over 95, or the percentage of hits with an exit velocity above 95 miles an hour is 28.7%. He was even better in 2019 where it was almost 40%. So this guy hits really hard. His contact rate is not very good. In fact, remember Lenny saying, I really want to think that this is true, but I'm not sure. It's just like, Lenny, you tell me in the chat. Didn't we decide that Jesse Winker was going to get the batting average, or the batting, he was going to be excellent because his contact rate was great. It was 82% Okay, in 2019, 83% in 2018, and 80% in 2017. So what happened to him? I don't know if this is going to continue. Like, if he ups his contact rate to what we're used to seeing with him or what we've seen in the past, he won't really be a 3 true outcome hitter anymore. And that's because his strikeout rate is going to go down completely. Right now, his strikeout rate is 25%. It barely qualifies as a 3 true outcome if you go by the stats that I already gave you. So normally he used to not strike out that much, but these are things where when you're 24 years old, you're 25 years old, we don't really know what type of hitter you are yet, especially if it's only your second or third season in the major leagues. All of this stuff is still, we're still figuring it out. Are you able to make the adjustments that you need to make for the pitchers to not have figured you out? Like Vladdy Jr. is working on that early in his career. Acuna, he was excellent when he first came up. He's still excellent. We know that he has all 5 tools for a hitter and can be amazing. But is he going to continue to strike out this much? Or is he going to make the adjustments that he needs to make to not? We'll see about Jesse Winker. He's still 26 years old. And that does lead us to Ronald Acuna. I do want to talk about him for a second because he struck out 30% of the time. That's the number 1 pick last season in fantasy. And this is always why it's a little bit sketchy to draft a guy number 1 overall that has not given you enough seasons to like prove that he's going to continue and stay consistent. Like every year Acuna strikeouts go up. Okay. He struck out almost 30%, 29.7% of the time. He was striking out last year. Could that have to do with COVID? Maybe. Could it have to do with the fact, whatever it is, he's only 24. He's entering this season. He will be 24. Last year he was 23. He upped his walk rate by like a ton. So when he first came up, he walked 9%. And then in 2019, it was 11%. And now in 2020, he walked almost 19% of the time. That's great. But he struck out 30% of the time. So here is an absolute 3 true outcome hitter right here. This is a guy. His contact rate went down from 70 to 62.5%. For me, I could assume it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle of what he did in 2019 and 2020, which is in between 62% contact rate and 70% contact rate. So it's still not going to be great. His contact rate is not going to be great. I don't know that for sure. That's my guess that, the tendency that we see. His home run to fly ball rate was 32%. It jumped up almost 10 percentage points. That's huge. But the thing about Acuna, he is projected to get 42 home runs and steal 30 bases. You say that can't be a 3 true outcome guy because he steals 30 bases. But yes, it can, because he doesn't do that till he gets on base. And he's got all the earmarks of a 3 true outcome hitter. Will he continue down that road? I don't know. It depends on if he is able to stop striking out so much. You can see that in 2020, his stats, his splits really centered around being home or away. Interesting, right? Hitting at home, he hit 317. Batting on the road, it was 213. That could be totally skewed because in 2019, he hit well both away and home. And in 2018, same thing. So we'll see what happens. He is still an open book right now. And that's why I bring him up, just to pay attention to that. Don't draft him first overall. That's my advice. We don't really know for sure what we're going to get out of him. His 200, okay, let's see what his batting average is. 250 batting average is a 30-point drop from his output in the season before that. He was also held back by the fact that he only appeared in 45 games. He missed time due to a wrist issue, and he also had some other small injuries that could definitely justify his strikeout rate. It could definitely justify all kinds of things. He had a career high on base percentage, 406. His slugging percentage was career high, 581. And he had a career best 159 weighted runs created plus. So those 3 things are very positive. He improved his walk rate, I told you, from 10 to 18%, and his exit velocity increased from 90.6 miles an hour to 92.4 miles an hour, and that's an excellent sign too. Just I'm not drafting him in the first round. That means I'm not going to get him on any of my teams. That's pretty much the way it pans out. You either draft him in the first round or you don't have him. With Bauer's the same thing. I mean, I'm Bauer's biggest fan, but I will not pay what other people are willing to pay for Bauer. And I just won't have him on any teams. I'm going to accept that early, and then maybe if I get lucky, I'll be happy. Trent Grisham is another one. He's on the verge. Okay, he steals bases. So you say to yourself, like, okay, he stole 10 bases. He hit 10 home runs. He had 42 RBI or 42 runs and 26 RBIs. So he must hit extremely high or extremely low in the batting order. Now, next year he's projected, according to RotoWire, he's projected for 25 home runs, 21 stolen bases, and 72 RBIs and 100 runs. He's at the top of the order. He's at the top of the order. That's great. Trent Grisham did excellent. Malpal, if you're here, I hope you are. Hi, Malpal. Hi, Douglas. Hi, Unholy Toledo and Chris Gallo. Nice to see you. Hope Debbie's doing well. And Aiden's still here. Aiden. Dr. Timko. George, nice to see you. Dr. Timko leaves. He'll be back. Yes, Acuna is absolutely young. He's still learning. That's why I say he's an open book. But if you have to take into consideration what happened last year. I mean, you only have a couple years to make your assessment on. And it's easy to say, well, Mike, Acuna's a youngster. He's super exciting to watch. He's really fun. But it's, to me, like I have to pick first tomorrow in this draft. And I'm not looking forward to that. I'm taking Mike Trout. There's no doubt about it. Like Mike Trout, if you look at his, just look at his stats, it's so consistent. And consistency for me is the biggest deal in the first round. So, but yes, I agree with you totally. These Trent Grisham, same thing we're doing right now, talking about Trent Grisham. Okay, he's one of only 6 players to notch double-digit home runs and double-digit steals in 2020. And the speed, I mean, when you look back at his minor league stats, you can see that he's always been a stolen base guy. This is nothing new for Trent Grisham. In 2019, he stole 26 bases between 2 different levels at the minor leagues. And he's got an 88.3 mile per hour average exit velocity, and really he's been doing that too. But how many home runs is he going to hit? Okay, so he does have great defense. That's going to keep him in the lineup. And also, this seems like San Diego has really worked around putting him in as an everyday part of the lineup. They've gotten, they've traded away spare outfielders to make room for this guy. And anyway, he pulls the ball a lot. He's got a 12.3% walk rate, which is why he qualifies for a 3 true outcome hitter. And he does have great defense, which I already told you. But let's look at his strikeout percentage. 26% strikeout rate, 70.2% contact. Now, in 2019, he had a 69% contact rate. But in the minor leagues, he's always shown good contact, like upper 70s and low 80s. Like, this is great contact, even if it is in the minor league. However, you can't just assume that it's going to translate over to the major leagues because it's a lot different. It's a lot harder. We'll see what happens with him. He definitely he's on the fence as far as, like, if he can make better contact closer to what he did in the minors. If he continues to, if he can lower his strikeout rate a little bit, he won't be 3 true outcome. But see, 3 true outcome, it can range a lot of, the most important thing to look at is the contact rate with a 3 true outcome. Because let's say you walk 15% of the time and you strike out 5 or 28% of the time. The big difference is, are you making contact and are you walking? Those 2 things, they're so important, because a 3 true outcome guy may be just crappy to put on your team. Like Miguel Sano could hurt your team. Joey Gallo, these guys can actually hurt your team depending on what the rules are, okay, in your league. So it's important to look at all of these. If a guy strikes out 30% of the time, but he hits 42 home runs, is you got to weigh your options here as far as like asset versus liability. How bad is he hurting your team? Pitchers, like, they're not 3 true outcome, obviously, but there's pitchers out there that pitch a lot of innings, and we used to call them innings eaters, and we used to like target these guys late in drafts. But nowadays, like, there's, compared to the other pitchers, it's almost like a liability to have a pitcher who has a mediocre ERA and WHIP, because he's got so many more innings than the rest of the guys on your roster that he is like overwhelming, and you're going to end up with his ERA and WHIP more than you will, because he has so many more innings, okay, than the rest of your pitchers. Don't draft innings eaters. They're like death to your pitching squad. You should target a really good reliever who doesn't get wins but strikes out. The one thing like that the forecaster is doing that I think is I'm still trying to get used to it, but I think it's great. Instead of doing strikeouts per innings pitched, they're going by strikeouts per batter faced, which is wonderful because innings pitched tells you nothing. How many pitches did it take you to get through that inning? So if you got a guy who's 200 innings pitched, okay, he strikes out 200 batters in 200 innings. Okay, but did he have to face like 10 or 12 batters or 13 batters just to get through that inning, and he struck out 3? That's bad. Our old statistics were not able to give us an idea, but I would say going forward, because we're using strikeouts per batters faced or whatever, that baseball forecaster has changed from innings pitched to a more, I think it's a better way to forecast pitchers. Like, if you only have to face like 5 hitters in an inning, right, and you're striking out 2 instead of 3, that's better. You get that much less opportunity to mess up everything. And so that's, that should come into play. But let's go back to the 3 true outcome. Teoscar Hernandez. Douglas is here, and I know that Douglas, every time I see Teoscar Hernandez, I think of you, Douglas. And I think Douglas really likes this guy, and I could see why. Now, okay, let's talk about Teoscar Hernandez, and he's on the Toronto Blue Jays. There's lots of youngsters with exciting potential around him. He's 28 years old, so he's like right at that prime age in his career. He hits the ball super hard. We know this for sure. He, let's see, it says that he had 2 multi-homer games before the end of July, and he was still playing at a high level in September. Then he got an oblique strain, okay? And then his final few games, after everybody thought he was going to be out for the season, but he returned after the minimum amount of time necessary, okay, on the IL. But he only hit 227, and his on-base percentage was 227 for the rest of the 11 regular season games. I'm not like holding that against him because obviously he was hurt. He super came back fast. He's still ranked among elite in virtually every batted ball metric, and his sprint speed ranks in the 85th percentile, meaning that he's in the top 15% for speed, which you don't really think of when you're talking about Teoscar Hernandez. You think like, okay, the guy may get a handful of stolen bases. He's really more known for his power than anything. But the point is that he can run fast. Absolutely, he can run fast. He absolutely got much better against right-handed pitching, which his strikeout rate against right-handed pitching went from 34% to 28.9%, which is still not great, but absolutely shows improvement. And we don't really know, like, going into next season, you have to consider that there's a possibility that, because 28.9% strikeout rate against right-handed pitchers is not great. It's horrible, actually. It's just, at that point in fantasy, you think to yourself, the difference between 29% strikeout rate and 34% strikeout rate is nothing to me. Because once it hits a certain threshold, like, they just strike out way too much. 28.9% is way too much, even though it's definitely an improvement from last season, which we've seen Teoscar improve in many ways over the last several seasons. So that's a great sign. RotoWire has projected for Teoscar Hernandez 33 home runs, 11 stolen bases, 84 RBIs, 82 runs, and a 264 batting average. This past season, he had 289 batting average. So we do expect it to come down a little bit. I say we, only because he's never had a great contact. His contact rate is 66.8%. You compare that to Jesse Winker's contact rate, it's like night and day. He also hits the ball really hard, like super great power, not great contact, did improve strikeouts, still 27 in the prime of his career right now. Plays most of the games. 6% walk rate. Now, okay, so you say, Andy, he doesn't qualify. He's not a 10% or higher walk rate. Yeah, but for the most part, he is. He only needs to just walk a little bit more for him to qualify he would be like the perfect 3 true outcome guy if he could just walk a little bit more. We'll see. He still has opportunity to grow. If he can wouldn't even have to cut down on his strikeouts to qualify as a 3 true outcome guy if he just started walking more. Hopefully he'll work on that this offseason. We don't really know, but his home run to fly ball ratio is 32.7%. This guy hits the ball so hard, so freaking hard. I wish I had his hard contact rate in front of me, because he ranks right up there with Ceneaux, Gallo. Like, he hits the ball super hard. So that's not a problem for him. He's going to hit probably right in the middle of the lineup, right, around these youngsters that are growing into great ball players. They, like Vladdy Jr., and they just all have it in their blood. So I think Toronto's like an upcoming team that's going to compete. And that's unfortunate for Red Sox fans, but Red Sox are just like, I'm sorry, they're a lost cause for the next couple of seasons. So, Toronto could take advantage of this situation and just absolutely go for it. So could Baltimore. If they were smart, they should too. Okay, moving forward. Ian Happ, Cubby, 27 years old, coming up. He'll be 27 this coming season. He's 26 last year. He hit 12 home runs, 258 batting average. They have him projected for 27 home runs and 4 stolen bases moving forward. But Ian Happ is somebody that I think we all went into the season last year with a little bit of expectations. We were kind of high on Ian Happ. We saw that he has decent power. We saw that he was growing into a decent hitter. He walks 13% of the time. Okay. The year before he only walked 9.6%, but I think he'll be able to, going forward, he'll walk about 10% of the time. Okay. His contact rate is still 68%. His strikeout rate is 27%. That's not going anywhere. His strikeout rate is always going to be high. You were never going to see this guy get less than 25% strikeout rates. It's just the way he is. He's 3 true outcome to the max. He does. He was, he entering last season, he started the season really good. He entered the season. He never really started to become crappy. Like 12 home runs is pretty good. That's pretty exciting. And the problem with him is that he's playing for the Cubbies, and like, what are they going to do with him? What are they going to do when they have, they're probably going to get rid of Chris Bryant, because this is what Theo does. Theo comes in, he gets you a World Series win, and then he leaves you in a complete shamble with like no farm system, like all kinds of debt. And then that's what Theo does. And then he leaves, and it's just, yeah, he's the greatest at getting a World Series. It was great for the Red Sox, and it was great for the Cubbies. It's just that when he leaves, the whole it's like he figures out a way to just go away when now they're gonna have to deal with it for years. At least they won a World Series. At least the Red Sox did too. But there's definitely whatever it is, he's the best at what he does. Win championships. Okay, he was able to keep his strikeout rate below 30 for the second straight season last year. He spent a good chunk of his 2019 season in the minor leagues working on making more consistent contact, and it really did pay off, because he was able to keep his contact rate up way better than it was before. Okay, it says he stopped playing in the infield, making just 2 appearances at first base. So he broke into the majors as more of a utility guy, but is now mainly an outfielder. So that's where he's going to qualify. It would be nice to see him have a little more eligibility, but it is what it is. He's an outfielder, so there you go. Matt Olson's next on the list. The expectations are super high for Matt Olson, and of course, we all love Matt Olson because he can hit the ball too super hard. Him and Matt Chapman are both really great power hitters. Oakland is a fun team to root for, and as far as I'm concerned, I wish Chris Davis would get his shit together. But talk about 3-2 outcome. I mean, I don't even talk about him though because I don't know if he's even going to be fantasy relevant. He certainly has not been fantasy relevant over the last couple seasons, and I've been promoting him, so I'm going to quit doing that. But Matt Olson had 36 home runs, and he added 20 points to his batting average in 2019. So we were like, whoop-dee, he's going to be great. He's going to be excellent. Everybody thinks, Matt Olson's a great, but then his batting average was so bad. He literally hit 195 in 2020, and I don't think that was a fluke. And the reason that I say that is because of his plate discipline. It did not get better. He swung at fewer pitches outside of the zone, outside of the strike zone, but his contact rate on pitches in the zone fell. So even though he's not striking at balls, he's not swinging at balls, pitches outside the zone, he's not making contact on pitches in the zone. He did increase his walk rate, so that to 13.9%, so 14% he's walking. Of course, he's still going to get a decent runs created total because he hits the ball so hard, but he really, every time he gets behind in the count, he struggles. If he gets, if he's behind in the count, bottom line, no matter what it is, he has a problem. Will that go away as he grows older? Maybe. There's definitely a reason to believe that for sure. He's going to be 27. Peak career opportunity here for Matt Olson. He did sign a 1-year contract with the A's to keep him going, but he didn't sign it for that much. And I mean, what are you going to do? That doesn't really say much because there's not a lot of money going around this year. So anyway, his contact rate last year was only 63%, and that is down from normally it's about 70%. It's between 68 and 72% his contact. It is what it is. He's never going to have a great batting average. He's just not. But his batting average on balls in play was horrible. It was 227 when normally he's right there with the rest of the people with a 300 batting average on balls in play. So he was getting unlucky, and he hits the ball hard. I mean, we can reiterate that over and over. However, he's also going to strike out. I hope that he can strike out less than 31% of the time. What we've seen in the past with him, and if we continue to see improvement there, we should expect his strikeout percentage to be at like 25%. 25, 24 best. Like, you're not going to see him have a great strikeout percentage ever. Although you may continue to see his walk rate go up if he continues to get better with his plate discipline. Like I said, he swung at less pitches outside the zone. Even though he made less contact with pitches in the zone, he still is, his eye is maturing. Like, he's showing growth with the way that he is able to identify if the pitch is going to be a strike or not. That's positive. I still like Matt Olson a ton. I think that after last year's 195 batting average, you might actually be able to get him discounted. When last year you were going to pay full price, this year you probably won't have to pay full price. People are going to see that batting average and be like, no thanks. And it kind of like his fly ball percentage is 45% though. Matt Olson is a guy that hits the ball hard, hits a lot of fly balls. What does that equate? That equates home runs. That's it. That's all there is to it. Like, if you hit the ball hard, you hit the ball in the air. That's a barrel, right? That's what we know nowadays as a barrel. He's never going to be perfect. Bobby Dalbeck, right? We have Bobby Dalbeck, a youngster first baseman in Boston, hit 8 home runs last year. Kind of surprising, like really exciting. A youngster, so people's excitement level is really high with them. He is Miguel Sano Jr. Literally, he's Miguel Sano Jr. in every way. Like okay, let's talk about his contact rate. It's 51%. His strikeout rate, 42%. And his walk rate is about 11%. his ability, he hits in the 40 percentile in fly balls, so he definitely hits some fly balls. Doesn't have a problem there. He's 25 years old. He's naturally a third baseman, but he doesn't play third base, which sucks for fantasy owners because if he did, he would be more valuable, but he was moved over to first base, and he doesn't have an everyday job. His job is in the lineup. His spot there is not guaranteed. He absolutely has a youngster, I forget his name right now. I think his name is Tristan. He is knocking on the door to come up to the majors. He's a first baseman. Boston is not going to mess around. They will either trade Bobby Dalbeck or they will find a different spot for him. But because he's completely blocked by Rafael Devers, his position is not guaranteed in the lineup every day. And just the downside is so significant in this pick that I would avoid him on every team, no matter what. I will avoid him. We don't really know what he's going to do, but he hits the ball super hard. We know that. Dalbeck either struck out, walked, or home run 62% of the 92 plate appearances. His first 92 plate appearances in the major leagues, 62% of them were 3-true outcome. He's the Miguel Sano Jr. right now. He is younger than Ceneaux, so we don't really know. Like, he's only 25. In the minor leagues, he was doing the same thing. You can tell that he was, his contact rate was like, it was only above 70% twice in the minors the entire time. So that was between 2016, 2017, 2018, 4 years in the minors. Not good contact. Usually, if there's hope that a player is going to increase his contact rate, you can see in the minors that he was able to have a high contact rate. Sometimes they come up to the majors and they can't make contact like they used to, but you know that they have that in their makeup and you know that they could possibly do that. In this case, Bobby Dalbeck is not to be relied on for any kind of contact rate above 68, maybe 70% if you're lucky. And his job is not secure in the Boston Red Sox lineup. I say do not draft Bobby Dalbeck. I know he's exciting. He hits home runs, but let's talk about Brandon Lowe. Brandon Lowe, Tampa Bay second baseman. It's kind of weird to even find a second baseman in this category because a lot of times second basemen aren't known for hitting with lots of power, but Brandon Lowe is an exception. The thing is that he absolutely was a stud going into the season. I had him on a lot of teams last year. He helped me win a couple leagues, and he just turned out to be an excellent. He started the season excellent anyway, but he finished the season horrible. So if you're the type of guy that pays a lot of attention to how they end the season, I mean, Brandon Lowe was horrible. He the first 6 weeks of 2020, okay. He was the leading candidate for AL MVP. He had a 273 batting average, 371 on base percentage, 612 slugging, 10 home runs, 26 runs, and 27 RBIs. That's after 1 month of the season, after the first 6 weeks. Okay. Then he hit not so good. He was, but in the playoffs, he was absolutely horrible. He just completely fell off. Now, we've only ever seen from Brandon Lowe half season performance. We saw the first half of 2019, then he got hurt, right? He was having an excellent first half. I believe that's what it was. He was having an excellent first half, and then we didn't see him in the second half. And so entering 2020, we're like, okay, when he was active, he was showing that he can hit the ball hard, lots of power, blah, blah, blah. If he has a jaw, like if he was also competing for playing time at that point. So it was a little risky, but last year, we saw him also once again enter the season great. We've never actually seen this guy finish a season great. He hit 300 with 6 home runs against left-handed pitchers last year, which was great because the year before that we were a little concerned about whether or not he was going to end up being a platoon player because they had what's the dude's name? It's Lowe and Lowe. Lowe is Brandon Lowe and the other guy that's not even a Ray anymore. He's not on the Rays team anymore, but he was another Lowe instead of Lowe. we didn't know for sure, like out of those two guys, who was going to get playing time. And here's the thing, Brandon Lau, he basically figured out how to hit lefties, which keeps him safe. Okay. And the fact that, he doesn't have any competition for his job anymore. Like, you can go into the season knowing that he's going to hit for power. He's going to play every day for the most part. And just, I would say, what are you going to do? He hit 118 in the playoffs, okay, in the entire playoffs. And he did have one World Series game where he hit 2 home runs. And that is the only reason why he hit 180 in the playoffs, because he turned into the worst hitter in the playoffs. He had 34% strikeout rate in the playoffs. How much do you hold that against him? Like, normally his strikeout rate is 25.9%. It's still high, but he walks 11.2%, and his contact rate is right around 70. So it's not the worst. It's not great by any means. He hits a lot of fly balls. He hits the ball really hard. He's a 3 true outcome player, no doubt about it. Evan White is the next one we'll talk about. We only have one more on the list. Evan White. You know, a lot of people are going to ignore Evan White going into this season. They're going to forget about him completely. He did not have a great first season, rookie season in the majors. He went from AA straight to the majors, and we knew that he was going to get a decent amount of playing time because Seattle liked him enough to sign him to a long-term contract before he ever stepped foot into the major leagues. So we knew that going into the season. And then we know that if you just extended your contract, we know that we're not going to play these games with, like, we can't bring you up till a certain day because then we're going to lose a year of service time. Like, we're going to lose a year of control. And teams play this game every year. And there's no doubt about it that they're allowed to play this game because Chris Bryant tried to sue the Cubbies for it when he knew he was ready to come up, and they left him down in the minors. He tried to sue them. They basically set precedent by saying, no, they're allowed to do that. I mean, there's just no doubt in anybody's mind that Chris Bryant was ready to come up to the majors when he was ready. And they make up some excuse. They always blame it on defense or something because they can't blame it on offense because they are hitting like crazy. Same thing with, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was just crushing it in the minors. We know, you can just assume, and, every year there's an exception where a team needs a player, they're going to call him up early, and they're going to surprise you. But just assume every year that players are going to stay in the minor league till a certain point in the season where they know that if they bring them up, they cannot possibly get enough service time, enough playing time to qualify as a full-time player, and their clock starts ticking. So anyway, we know that's possible. When a player signs a long-term contract before the season starts, you know that it's not possible that they're going to stay down in the minors. They need them up here. Otherwise, they wouldn't have signed that long-term contract. But they will avoid losing control over players that they feel are a good long-term investment. Evan White is that guy. Now, Evan White is not somebody to be completely forgotten about. He had a horrible season in his first year. Yes, this is true. He's only 24 years old. He batted 176, but he did hit 8 home runs, and he stole 1 base. Ron Chandler's assessment system, Babs, it loves Evan White. Babs loves Evan White, thinks that Evan White is going to steal bases, which is odd because we've never seen this guy steal bases in the minor leagues. He didn't steal bases in the major league. But the thing about it is that Babs obviously sees his sprint speed is high. He's like one of the fastest runners in baseball. So whether or not, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to expect stolen bases out of Evan White. But the point is, if he wants to run, he can. He's fast. And that's what Babs sees. And that's why Babs loves this guy. He was a big disappointment last year, okay? He was horrible. His contact rate was only 53.8% in the majors. But look at his minor league contact rate. He was high contact his entire youngster career. 87%. 78%, 72, 80, 74, and then 53. The outlier is obviously this. But again, you can't go by just minor league contact rate because the pitchers are a lot different and it's just a lot different situation. Will he get a better contact rate? The chances are good that he will grow into a better contact rate as he matures and gets more experience. His His fly ball percentage is 42%. His strikeout rate is horrible, 41%. But look at what he did in the minors. He only struck out 23%, 20%, 19%. He was good eye in the minors, had good plate discipline, and there's no reason for us to believe that he's going to continue to hit or strike out 40% of the time. So that's just, that's just what I'm saying. I think he's a great sleeper, really late in drafts. You probably won't even have to draft him till the very last round. Even if you're in like a 40-round league, people are not drafting him because he had such a bad first season. His walk rate is not quite 10%, but it's 9%. So we'll see if he's able to improve his walk rate, improve his plate discipline. We will learn a lot this season coming up, but he still has the job at first base. He still every day he's going to be in the lineup, right in the middle of the order. He definitely hits the ball hard, and he's a great defensive first baseman. So even if he's horrible, even if he strikes out a lot, he has a long-term contract. The Mariners are looking to allow their players to grow. They have the youngest team in baseball, and they are looking forward to finally making the playoffs. Like, they haven't made the playoffs longer than any professional sports team in the United States, including football, basketball, hockey, like none of them. The Mariners have gone the longest without making the playoffs. They are the youngest team, and you can expect them to continue throwing out their youngsters into the mix because they want to give them experience and time to grow. So that brings me to one other player that I had on the list that we skipped. I think we skipped Cole Calhoun too. But I just want to bring up Kyle Lewis because Kyle Lewis, 25 years old, rookie last year, hit really good. In his first 317 plate appearances, he hit 17 home runs. He had a 341 batting average on balls in play, though. 22% home run to fly ball ratio. He needs to be more consistent because if you look at he walks 14% of the time. He strikes out 29% of the time. And his contact rate is 65.5%. He's a perfect 3-true outcome hitter so far, but he is definitely not done growing. He absolutely could work on his plate discipline, his contact rate. He could just continue to get better. He was only 24 last year, and he will be 25 this season. Everybody loves him. He was trying to qualify for Rookie of the Year. He did get Rookie of the Year, American League Rookie of the Year. However, he hit 368 with a 456 on base percentage the first 30 days of the season, 22.4% strikeout rate first 30 days. Then he finished with the last month of the season, he hit 150 and he had a 265 on base percentage and a 37% strikeout rate. So did pitchers start to figure him out? There's a question there because he started off really good, really successful at the plate, and then all of a sudden he stopped hitting well. He doesn't hit, he's in the top 30% for hard hit rate, so he does hit the ball hard, although he doesn't hit the ball extremely hard, and he does maintain a decent walk rate, so we'll see that continue. His average exit velocity is not that high. It's in the top 40%, so it's almost like he's about a little better than average in exit velocity or hard hit rate. Sorry. It says that he appears to be on track to hit 30 home runs a season, and that's pretty much what you're going to expect from him. But he definitely needs to be a little more consistent with his contact rate, which was 65%. The year before, in 2019, in the majors, it was 59%, so it got better. And in the minor leagues, his contact rate was in the middle 70s, mid 70s. So you can expect that it's probably going to continue to get a little bit better as he moves forward. But the idea that he came up, he was excellent, then all of a sudden he just dropped off the map, that is a sign that pitchers are starting to figure you out the second or third time they face you. They will look at videotape. Catchers will look at the video. They will say, here's where his weakness is. If he doesn't fix it, we're going to take advantage of it. And whether or not he's going to be able to do that, we'll see. The sophomore slump is a term that we hear a lot in fantasy. And the sophomore slump is completely based on this idea that a youngster comes up and in his first year he's excellent, right? He hits the ball, his contact rate is great. He doesn't strike out a lot. He's like everybody's, perfect candidate to be on their fantasy team, and then all of a sudden like he stinks. Sophomore slump. And it's based on the fact that he doesn't choose to continue to make adjustments. Now, that's probably because he was so good he didn't feel like he needed to, or he didn't stay in great shape in the off season. He comes to camp like out of shape, and or maybe he's like Vlad Jr., who never really had to work that hard at his abilities because he was just born really good, and he has always been able, like, way better than the rest of the players around him until he got to the major leagues. Now he's not way better than the players around him, and he has to actually make an effort to stay in shape. He has a body style, like, it's just naturally big, and if he doesn't pay attention to that, he's not only going to end up at first base, but he's going to end up like whatever it is. But I'm not dogging Vladdy. I'm just saying that Vladdy might be ready to like completely break out, by the way. I actually am targeting him depending on where he goes in drafts. I will target Vladdy. I think it's time for him. I think that he absolutely has worked hard this offseason to get in shape and to make the adjustments that he didn't really think that he never really knew that he needed to do that because he was so much better than everybody else around him. That's the sophomore slump. It happens to a lot of players. Kyle Lewis could definitely happen to him. But okay, so I hope you guys are having a great holiday. I have been putting lights up every year. I buy another string of lights to put up outside, and like half my lights weren't working. Every year, half the lights aren't working. It's such a pain. And so I bought the new tools to fix the lights called Light Keeper Pro, and now they have the LED Keeper to fix. It's like a 10-in-1 tool, and I've been looking forward to using it to fix my lights because it's not just like where one light burns out and then the rest are burned out. It's like random lights throughout the entire string are just burned out. I'm like, what the hell? So then, of course, right when I got this new tool, it started snowing, and I haven't been able to really figure it out since. So I'm looking forward to doing that today, and we have a bunch of snow, but not intrusive snow. Anyways, I hope you guys are having a good holiday, as good as it can be. And tomorrow is a big deal in the sky. You look up to see Jupiter and Saturn get closer than they've been in like 800 years. It's supposed to be really bright because it will look like they're right on top of each other. And just 2020, who knows what could happen. But hope all is good. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and we will see you next week.